The pale morning light filtered through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air as Amy Fleming's hand, steady and resolute, placed a worn leather journal on the polished surface of the table. No one was there to see her go. There was no dramatic farewell, no tearful goodbyes, just a profound and unsettling silence that seemed to have a weight of its own. It wasn't a sudden storm that had driven her away, but the slow, creeping frost that had finally hardened the ground around her heart. Outside, her beloved horse, Spartan, stood saddled and waiting, a silent confidant to a decision that had been made in the quiet, lonely hours of the night. Her duffel bag, packed with only the bare essentials, sat by the door, a stark symbol of her departure. By the time the first golden rays of dawn painted the vast prairie sky, Amy was a distant figure on the horizon, a ghost fading into the landscape. For years, Amy had been the anchor of Heartland, the one who mended not just fences, but the fractured spirits of her family. She had held them all together, even as her own world had been quietly crumbling around her. Since Ty's death, she had poured every ounce of her being into being a fortress of strength for her daughter, Lyndy, for her grandfather, Jack, and for her sister, Lou, for everyone but herself. But even the strongest fortress has its breaking point. It hadn't been a single cataclysmic event that had shattered her resolve, but the slow, relentless erosion of her spirit with each passing day, each sleepless night. She had perfected a smile for Lyndy, lost herself in the familiar, comforting rhythm of working with the horses, and had become a master of pretending that she was whole. But beneath the carefully constructed facade, she was perpetually sifting through the wreckage of the life she had lost, desperately searching for a piece of herself that she could recognize. Her family, seeing her quiet resilience, had mistaken it for healing. They saw the passage of time as a gentle, soothing balm on a wound that was still raw and deep. What they didn't see were the silent vigils she held by Ty's empty armchair in the quiet solitude of the evenings. They were unaware of the whispered conversations she still had with his photograph each morning, a ritual that was both a comfort and a fresh wave of pain. They didn't know that sometimes, in the midst of calming a troubled horse, she would feel a phantom presence at her side, a familiar touch on her hand, and for a heart-stopping moment, she would believe it was Ty guiding her as he always had. These were not simply memories. They were haunting echoes that tethered her soul to a past she couldn't release and a present she couldn't fully embrace. The final push came not with a bang, but a whisper. It wasn't a heated confrontation or a tearful breakdown. It was a quiet moment at the dinner table when Lyndy, looking at a family photo, asked, "Mommy, were you happiest then?" The silence that followed was Amy's only answer, a void that screamed the truth she could no longer deny. She didn't know anymore. The mask of strength had become her face, and she had forgotten the woman beneath it. She had forgotten what it meant to be just Amy, not a widow, not a mother, not a daughter, but simply herself. That innocent question unlocked a door deep inside her, a door she hadn't even known was there, revealing a truth she could no longer ignore. She had to leave. Not as an act of abandonment, but as an act of self-preservation. She slipped away under the cloak of darkness, her note a testament to her love and her pain. "I need to find my way back. Please look after Lyndy. I love you more than words can say." Jack found it first, the folded paper a stark white against the dark, familiar wood of the table. He stood frozen, the familiar sounds of the house suddenly alien and jarring in the heavy silence. Lou discovered him there, her initial fear for Lyndy morphing into a cold, creeping dread as she saw the note. Her own formidable strength seemed to evaporate, leaving her weak and breathless. Lyndy slept on, cocooned in childhood innocence, unaware that the axis of her world had irrevocably shifted as Amy had vanished, leaving behind only the faint, lingering scent of her perfume and the ghost of her footsteps on the well-worn porch. Jack Bartlett was a man well acquainted with loss. He had weathered more of life's storms than he cared to count, burying friends and watching dreams fade to dust. But the raw emptiness of Amy's absence was a different kind of tempest, one that threatened to shatter his own stoic resolve. The discovery of the note felt like a fissure in his very soul. In his typical fashion, Jack didn't weep, but a profound stillness settled over him as he stared at the vacant space by the door where Amy's boots had always been. He found himself listening for the cadence of her laughter, the earthy scent of hay that clung to her clothes, the familiar creak of the floorboards beneath her feet. The silence that greeted him was a heavy, suffocating weight. Lou, however, was unable to contain her anguish. The sight of Jack, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly as he held the note, was her undoing. She sank to the floor, the full weight of the situation crashing down on her. Her little sister, her confidante, the one with whom she had shared a lifetime of arguments and laughter, was gone. No farewell, no destination, just an aching void. Lou read the note again and again, the words blurring through her tears, as if hoping they would somehow rearrange themselves into something less final. I need to find my way back. It was a sentiment that was both a glimmer of hope and a sharp, twisting knife in her heart. Her mind went into overdrive, replaying the past few months, desperately searching for the clues she had so clearly missed. Amy's faraway gazes, the way she would clutch Lyndy a little too tightly, the nights she had fallen asleep in the barn, her head resting against Spartan's warm neck. Lou had interpreted these as signs of resilience, but now she saw them for what they were, a slow, silent retreat into herself. Then came the gut-wrenching task of explaining the inexplicable to Lyndy. "Where's Mommy?" she asked. Her voice a small, bright beacon of innocence. Jack's voice failed him, the words caught in his throat. Lou, taking a deep, shuddering breath, managed to explain that Mommy had to go and help some very special horses who were very far away. Lyndy's small frown and her simple yet devastating observation that her mother hadn't said goodbye was a fresh wave of agony. Lou pulled her into a fierce embrace, whispering reassurances of her mother's boundless love. But words were a poor substitute for a mother's arms. It felt as though the very soul of Heartland had departed with Amy. The horses were agitated, a low hum of anxiety running through the stables. The familiar, comforting warmth of the barn felt cold and unwelcoming, the very air thick with a palpable sense of loss. But life, with its relentless, unforgiving rhythm, went on. Jack, his heart a leaden weight in his chest, tended to the horses. Lou, her face a mask of forced cheerfulness, guided Lyndy through her morning routine. But every action was imbued with a profound sense of sorrow, every smile a monumental effort. And in the quiet moments, the same question burned in their minds. Why now? What had been the final straw that had compelled her to walk away from everything she held dear? In the vacuum of answers, a seed of doubt began to sprout. If she could vanish so silently, so completely, would she ever find her way back? And if she did, would she be the same Amy they all knew and loved? Nathan had come to Heartland as a temporary hand, a quiet, unassuming presence to help with the endless stream of chores. In the void left by Amy's departure, he found himself stepping into a role he had never sought or imagined. It was a subtle, gradual transition, almost imperceptible at first. He was the one who repaired the fence that Amy had always diligently maintained, the one who calmed the skittish new mare that had only just begun to respond to her gentle touch. He was there before the sun rose, checking on the animals, and long after it had set, ensuring they were settled and secure for the night. Slowly, the family began to realize that his contributions extended far beyond the daily tasks. Nathan was becoming the quiet, steady force that was holding them all together. Lou was the first to truly see it. She observed the gentle way he knelt to tie Lyndy's shoes, the patient way he sat with her at breakfast, never attempting to be a replacement, but simply being a constant, reassuring presence. For a little girl adrift in the confusing sea of her mother's absence, his unwavering steadiness was an anchor. Jack, however, watched Nathan with a guarded heart. It wasn't a matter of distrust, but a deep-seated fear that the gaping hole Amy had left was being filled too quickly, too seamlessly. He feared that the family, the ranch, and even Lyndy might begin to accept this new reality, that the sharp, painful edges of Amy's absence might begin to dull and soften. It was Ty's unmistakable, elegant script. The carving had not been there the day before. Jack was absolutely certain of it. That same afternoon, Lou found a faded photograph of herself and Amy as children lying on her pillow. She knew for a fact that the photograph was stored in a box in the attic. No one had been in her room, and Lyndy was at a friend's house for the day. When she showed it to Jack, his hands trembled as he took it from her. "Someone is trying to send us a message," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The impossible, audacious thought began to take root in their minds. Could Amy be following a hidden trail, a secret she had kept from them all? Had she stumbled upon something, a whisper of a rumor that suggested Ty's death was not the final chapter? Lou, ever the pragmatist, tried to suppress the thought, but her heart ached for the impossible. What if she found something, Jack? What if there's hope? She asked, her voice trembling. His silence was her answer. The same wild hope, mingled with a terrible, paralyzing fear, was mirrored in his eyes. Lou began her own quiet investigation, poring over Amy's recent credit card statements. She discovered a charge from a remote, out-of-the-way gas station and a small, nondescript motel hundreds of miles away. She also found a crumpled note tucked into the pocket of Amy's favorite jacket with a series of numbers and a single cryptic word, Raptor. Was it a clue? A name? A location? Was Amy chasing a phantom, or was she on the brink of uncovering a truth that would shatter their world? Another call came, this time leaving a voicemail. It was only a few seconds long, but the sound was unmistakable. The piercing cry of a hawk. It was a sound that Amy had taught them all to recognize, a sound that had always been deeply connected to her memories of Ty. Lou rushed outside, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. There, perched on a fence post, was a hawk, a single familiar feather tied to its leg with a thin strip of leather. It was a secret, silent signal between Amy and Ty, a symbol of their unbreakable bond. Was this a message from Amy, a sign that she was on the right path? Or was someone else orchestrating these strange, unsettling events? Hope is a resilient, tenacious thing at Heartland, a wildflower that can bloom in the most barren of landscapes. But this new, fragile hope was a terrifying one, for it was not just about Amy's return. It was about the potential resurrection of a love they had thought was lost to them forever. Was Ty somehow miraculously alive, or was Amy losing herself in a desperate, grief-fueled quest to bring back a man who now existed only in her memories? Far from the rolling, familiar hills of Hudson, Amy found herself in a rugged, windswept corner of the country, a place where the mountains scraped the sky and the people were as weathered and resilient as the landscape itself. It was a place to disappear, to shed the heavy cloak of her old life, and finally listen to the quiet whisper of her own heart. She found work at a remote horse sanctuary, a haven for rescued and rehabilitated wild mustangs. The horses were untamed and scarred, their spirits as fractured and broken as her own. The owner, a woman named Sarah, was a kindred spirit, a woman who understood the profound language of silence and gave Amy the space and solitude she so desperately craved. Amy poured her grief, her hope, and her love into the horses, her gentle touch and whispered words slowly, painstakingly earning their trust. At night, by the flickering light of a single lantern, she would write in her journal, her words a torrent of love and sorrow, letters to Lyndy, to Jack, to Lou, and to the man who was both her greatest love and her most profound sorrow. One entry read, "They tell me you're gone, but I feel you in the wind on my face, in the warmth of the sun, in the quiet, untamed strength of these wild horses. Am I chasing a memory, or are you leading me somewhere? I don't know anymore, but for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, I feel like I'm on the right path." One afternoon, a new volunteer arrived at the sanctuary, a man with a quiet demeanor and a gentle, intuitive way with the horses. Amy didn't pay him much attention at first, but when she heard him softly humming a melody that only she and Ty had ever shared, she froze. She looked up, her heart lurching painfully in her chest. He didn't look exactly like Ty, but there was something in his eyes, a familiar spark of kindness and a deep, resonant well of sadness. "Do I know you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man simply smiled, a sad, knowing smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Muse, mew." "I don't believe so," he said, "but you have a kind and gentle soul." He left as quietly and mysteriously as he had arrived, disappearing down the long, dusty road. Amy knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that it wasn't Ty, but the encounter left her shaken and imbued with a renewed sense of purpose. An old woman in the nearby town had once told her, "Some folks come to these mountains to lose themselves, and some come to be found." That night, Amy looked up at the vast, star-dusted canvas of the sky and let the tears fall, not of sorrow, but of a quiet, dawning hope. She was no longer running from the pain. She was moving toward something, a truth that was still shrouded in mystery but felt closer than ever before. softer than ever before. The breakthrough she had been searching for arrived in the form of a small hand-delivered package. A young boy from the town ran up to her, his face flushed with excitement, holding a small, intricately carved wooden feather. "The man who was staying at the old abandoned cabin said to give this to you," he said. Amy's breath caught in her throat. On the back of the feather, a single powerful word was burned into the wood. Always. It was Ty's promise, their sacred word. Clutching the feather to her chest, a profound sense of clarity washed over her. She knew then that she wasn't chasing a ghost. Ty may be gone, but his love was still a powerful guiding force in her life, leading her on a journey that was far from over. It was time to make a choice, return to the familiar, comforting embrace,